Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thank you very much. We are back for hour number 2. Our Democrats this evening are Coco Sudek. She is an attorney, and John McDonough. He is a music professor at Northwestern and a writer and a journalist. And our Republicans tonight are Jennifer Nevins. She is a nationalist. She's also an education consultant. She was one of the original Trumpsters. And also Chris Roebling is here, and he is a political consultant. And he also is, for many years, has been a regular guest on this program. And joining us now from his home in Monmouth, Illinois, is Robin Johnson. Robin Johnson has been a professor at Monmouth College for many, many years, and he is also host of the program Heartland Politics on KBUR in Burlington, Iowa, which is the Beyond the Beltway affiliate there. And Robin, nice to have you back with us on Beyond the Beltway.
Good evening.
I'd like to begin with one of the big stories today, and that is the Des Moines Register. I guess yesterday was supposed to have a big poll in association with CNN, which was it was billed as the last poll in Iowa, and they never published it. What happened?
There was a glitch in the mechanics of the poll, the methodology, where callers were. This is where the paid callers. Reach people and ask the poll questions. Apparently, a volunteer for the Buttigieg campaign called in to say that he wasn't included on several of the key questions. And the call was made then to the polling company, and they decided to cancel the poll instead of produce results that weren't fully including all the candidates. Now, this poll is like the gold standard of Iowa polls. This is Ann Seltzer, who knows Iowa and polling very, very well. So this was kind of one of those unexpected developments we've seen late in campaigns that happens sometimes that kind of just changes the dynamics of what's going on in the ground.
Now, again, when we last spoke, we were referring last week, actually, on this program, we were referring to a New York Times poll, and that is the latest. And according to that New York Times poll, Joe Biden is in first place, if we can put that graphic up for the TV folks. Bernie Sanders, rather, is leading with 25%, Pete Buttigieg 18%, Joe Biden 17%, Elizabeth Warren 15%, and Amy Klobuchar moving up at 8%. Is there anything that's happened in the last 48 hours, 72 hours, that you would see any movement in those in the order of that finish?
Well, the recent polls here have shown it tighter. That gave Sanders more of an edge. And the thing that I think people were really interested in seeing in the Des Moines Register poll was whether Amy Klobuchar had gained some momentum late. I've been talking to people that suggest just anecdotally that she was picking up support among people who were deciding late, and people, more normal people, unlike us who follow this all the time, people that were planning to go to the caucus and have just now started to look at who to possibly go vote for. That's going to be wiped out. But I think you're looking at a pretty tight contest. Probably, my guess is Sanders and Biden will be at the top, but who knows?
My question to you also is: we should mention that tomorrow morning I'm going to head to Iowa. You and I, along with your students from Monmouth College, we're going to be together at Burlington High School for the caucus on Monday night. But explain to the audience how the results are not only told to those people at the high school, but how are they calculated by the state officials, and the numbers that ultimately come out. How are we supposed to dissect those? Because it's not exactly just the winner that's important.
They've added an element this year, Bruce. It's going to make it could be even more confusing. There'll be so much spin, we'll be dizzy afterwards. They're going to provide the total counts not only on the delegate equivalents from each precinct. And again, this is the first step in a multi-step process: precinct caucuses, then county caucuses, then district, then state. But they're also, for the first time, going to ask everybody that comes in first who they're for and tabulate those. They haven't done that traditionally. They're also going to be asking for people's preference after the first realignment, which is candidates, people that are there that are for a candidate that doesn't achieve 15% of those present can realign to another candidate, or they can just go home. So there's going to be three numbers: the delegate equivalents, the original number of people for each candidate, and then the number after each alignment. So technically, there's going to be people that could finish, say, third in delegate equivalents, but have the most people for them when they come into the precinct caucuses.
So
I hope I made that clear.
In that one precinct where we will be tomorrow night at Burlington High School, once those numbers come in, do they go to a central counting tabulation in Des Moines? Is that where they're gathering all the numbers, or elsewhere?
Yes, it'll be in Des Moines. They have an app to use, or they can just use a phone. There'll be or email. There'll be several ways they could communicate that.
Our Republican Chris Roebling has a question for you, Chris.
Professor, great to be with you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, Chris.
Coming from Chicago, even though I've got roots in Lynn County and Polk County, I want to say I'm a little skeptical about this, and I think that I sure hope the Des Moines Register or somebody out there publishes the full story about why this happened and how it could have happened. I can't imagine, given the prominence of this poll and its significance to whichever party, whether it's the Republicans and an open year for Republicans or Democrats as in this year, I can't imagine a methodological slip up on this poll. It's like the field poll of California. This is the gold standard for Iowa. And I have to think that maybe somebody wanted to deflate somebody else's balloon and deny the other candidate his or her last bit of momentum going into the conversation on Monday.
Go ahead.
But maybe it's just an embittered Chicago Republican. Who knows?
Okay.
According to my information,
Go ahead, Robin, then we'll back to John.
Yeah, I mean, social media was filled with conspiracy theories, with every candidate saying that they heard they were ahead, and that's why this fell apart. I can just say Ann Seltzer, the Des Moines Register in particular, have the highest standards of ethics, and so I accept what they're saying and take it at face value. I think this was an unfortunate error, and who knows, we may find out differently at some point, but I accept at face value what happened. It was an unfortunate error, and maybe we'll find out more about the specifics of it down the road.
John McDonough has a comment.
according to my information, it was not an error of ethics. It was an error of, the telephone poll taker apparently couldn't read the copy on his or her monitor, so they raised the typeface a little bit to be larger, and the screen couldn't contain it, and it pushed Buttigieg's name off of her screen. Yeah. It was a totally random glitch.
We always knew his name was going to get him in the end.
Coco Sudek.
But I have a question for you. What is in your experience, what is the impact of a campaign's ground game, strength of volunteers, and organizational heft, and who do you see that's got who do you see that's got an active and impressive ground game now?
Robin, that's the question. We do have to pause for some commercials, but we'll be back with Robin Johnson, who's joining us live from Monmouth, Illinois. And again, he teaches at Monmouth College, and also he is with Heartland Politics, which is a show on KBUR. He's been a frequent guest on this program, and we'll be back with him live, back from Chicago in a moment. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's go to Robin Johnson. Robin, go back to you. And the question was asked by Coco as to whether or not you can ascertain the quality of the ground game of the various candidates.
And whether it matters.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I remember 4 years ago accurately predicting that Ted Cruz would win Iowa over Donald Trump because of his organization, and he wound up winning by 2 points. This time, it's of equal importance, if not more, with a multi-candidate field. What I'm hearing is that, of course, Bernie Sanders had his field organization in place the last 4 years. He's got a very committed group of followers. Elizabeth Warren has been working the rural areas strongly, and I'm curious if that's going to manifest itself tomorrow night in doing better in those more remote rural counties. Biden got to the game a little late. Buttigieg has been building up his organization as well. So I've seen talk to people that are just getting numerous mailers every day, door knocks every day. So all the candidates understand this, but I think it helps probably the more activist wing of the party a little bit more.
What would be the biggest headline that you can think of that would come out of Iowa tomorrow night?
The biggest headline will be if one of these candidates, I think, runs up a 5 to 6 point margin, which we're not expecting right now based on the recent polling. That's another unfortunate aspect of the Seltzer Des Moines Register poll not coming out. It could be Bernie Sanders runs up with a significant margin. It could be Joe Biden does as well. I'm still anxious to see how Klobuchar does as well. If she were to move up into third place, that would be worth a headline as well. I just wonder if, as I alluded to earlier, it's going to be a very muddled message where the delegate equivalent winner won't line up with the actual raw vote winner.
Can
Robin,
you explain delegate? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you explain delegate equivalent?
Yeah, it's each county is going to have so many delegates to go to the county convention. So they're just apportioned out at the precinct level how many delegates they would get proportionately per candidate as they move up through the process.
Iowa actually is deciding who's going to go decide.
It doesn't sound, Robin, like Sanders or Warren have been hurt by their absence from the scene and being stuck in Washington.
No, I think that's because, again, they're the more progressive candidates. They've got the more committed followers, and Sanders has had his organization in place for the last 4 years, pretty much. And I think Warren again got started early, and I was hearing early on that she had one of the best organizations in the state. And like I say, they've been working the rural areas really hard.
Let me
And
ask
while
you
there
this,
aren't as
I got
many-
a quick one.
everyone seems to, every 4 years, people question the wisdom of Iowa being first. And I'm wondering if, obviously, I think we will expect to hear that again. Michael Bloomberg has already basically signed off on that by agreeing not to get into Iowa, not getting into anything in the month of February. He's going to wait until Super Tuesday on March, coming up in early March. But my question to you is, in addition to the battle to retain being number one, do you think the complexity of the way you vote in Iowa is going to play against you in the future because people are going to say, this is too complicated a process?
Yeah, it could, Bruce, especially if tomorrow night, again, the delegate equivalent winner doesn't align with whoever the popular vote winner is. So that could muddy things quite a bit, and we'll see. Probably the big disaster would be is if the three winners are different. So yeah, it could call into question definitely. On top of Iowa perhaps not being a demographic representative state, whether this state should lead off or not. Again, as we talked about before, it forces candidates to come down and practice retail politics, not knock doors, get to know people, and not just advertise on TV, which is nice.
But a number of states could do that. I mean, certainly
Right.
Nebraska, New Hampshire can do that, but there's a variety of other states that are small enough that could probably, meet that mission. Chris Roebling with a question.
I have to. My snarky reminder about Bloomberg, of course, is he doesn't have to worry about any of that because he knows the Democrats will change the rules for him as they already have. Now, back to the Iowa situation. Professor, who has succeeded in lowering expectations? So who has created a hedge for themselves so that folks will not be looking for them to win? Is that Mayor Pete, or has Mayor Pete kind of gotten into the expectations game because he's saying, I'm a Midwesterner, and so I'm going to do well in Iowa? Who has lowered expectations so they can't lose?
Well, I think in some ways it might be Biden because he's put a lot on South Carolina and the African American vote there, where perhaps he can say that he competed in Iowa, but he's got a state coming up that the polls show right now that he's sure to win. Other than that, I think I think there's going to be a lot of spin tomorrow night, and usually you have three people tickets punched out of Iowa. You could have as many as five. If some of those polls were accurate, so I think Biden's
But
probably
Robin,
the main.
would you acknowledge that if you have 5 tickets punched out of Iowa, nobody lost?
To some degree,
Other
yeah.
than maybe Michael Bennett, but I mean, 5 tickets. That's that's a lot of that's a lot of freebies out of Iowa.
Well, again, based on the polls, why I'm saying that is because some of the most recent polls we had the four candidates ahead and bunched around 15%, just very close to each other. And Klobuchar was, I think, at about 7 in those polls. If she does get some momentum at the end and rise up and maybe take some votes away from other candidates, if she's in double digits, and again, the top person hasn't built up a big lead, say get over 30%, then you could have more candidates moving on, at least saying they've got reason to move on in the process.
Coco.
Why doesn't the state of Iowa look at this and make it a little bit simpler, a little bit easier, a little bit more encouraging of participation? Why does it stick with this convoluted process?
They tried to propose virtual caucuses, which would allow more people to participate and not have to show up at the caucus site, but the Democratic National Committee vetoed that because it started resembling a primary too much, which would raise the hackles of New Hampshire. So they've got a right to have the first caucus in the nation. New Hampshire keeps the right to have the first primary, at least for now.
And that's a conspiracy of two that's gone back many, many years between the secretaries of state in each of those states who want to keep that 1-2 punch because it's good for business. Fills up a lot of hotel and motel rooms.
Can we all agree that's silly?
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I think everybody always agrees that it's silly, but again, it never gets changed. I mean, the one thing is that should Michael Bloomberg come on and by some magic moment become the Democratic nominee, he will have influence on the DNC, and I think that he'll put the kibosh on that conspiracy of two. But again, that's a long shot.
I think in defense of Iowa that a lot of people are concerned that if it didn't start here, that people would take this area for granted. It would be true flyover country. People wouldn't compete here. And for the Democrats in particular, it's important that they do because this region is going to decide the next presidential race.
One of the other races I'm looking towards November, but again, the Democrats would like to get rid of Joni Ernst, your Republican U.S. Senator, who is running for re-election. How would you assess her vulnerability come November?
I don't think anybody's invulnerable in these Midwestern states. There's 4 candidates, I believe, running against her. It should be a very spirited Democratic primary, but she's definitely on the target list, and she's not invulnerable at all.
Mm-hmm. And again, let me have you. We've talked a couple of segments last week and a couple of segments tonight. Look into your crystal ball. You're in Monmouth, Illinois. You've covered what's happening in Iowa. You've got students that are going to be part of this caucus process come tomorrow night. If you were to look into your crystal ball, give us what you think will be the top 3 finishers.
Oh boy!
Watch out! He's keeping a tape of this.
I'd have to go Sanders and Biden, and part of me says Klobuchar is going to rise up, but I still think Warren's got the organization, and I would pick her for third.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think answer my own question about what the big headline would be. I think a huge headline would be if Klobuchar rises to the occasion. I mean, people have been talking about her for a couple of weeks that she's on the move. She got the New York Times endorsement. She got the Quad City Times.
She got attacked by AP. She got unfairly attacked by the AP for a conviction 18 years ago or something.
So the point is that, to me, that the big headline would be if she finishes in the top 3. If she finishes in the top 3, I think it means that somebody else obviously didn't. But and she would finally be she'd finally be providing some expectation to people who've been supporting her for a long time without any obvious reason to do so. Would you acknowledge that? I mean, you're Amy Klobuchar is not your candidate because
I'm not a fan.
She's too moderate.
I also don't think she's very nice. I don't think she's a president. I think she is an excellent senator. I think she could be majority leader. I think she could be whip. But I don't think she's a president. And I think her best shot is Iowa, and then I think it's Minnesota. And other than that, I think that her campaign will be over fairly soon.
Very quickly, there are two primaries that are going on at the same time. There's the progressive primary, and then there's what's left of the regular Democratic liberal primary. And I think that those are the tickets that we've got to look for. Who's getting the ticket out? Is it Bernie over Warren, which it looks like it is? No. Is it Biden over Buttigieg and Klobuchar, which it looks like it is? And
I think that's right.
I think if the Democratic Party was smart, it would.
If she finishes
the
third,
whistle.
she could be that one. She could be the surprise there. On that moment, we are out of time. Robin Johnson from Monmouth College, I thank you very much for joining us. Heartland Politics on KBUR, and I'll see you tomorrow night at the Burlington High School. Don't go away. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thanks very much for joining us. Let's go to Jane, listening to us in Woodland, California on KTKZ. Go ahead.
Hi. Well, I have 3 points, if I may.
Sure.
Number one, to the woman who said Trump was either a rapist or fostered rape. Actually, it's just the opposite. With open borders, we had sex traffickers, and probably may still have them, coming through, and they raped women and children. And Trump is trying to stop that by closing up these open borders. So that is a lie. Number two, Trump is a fascist, which, I hear about 10 times a day. There is a book I would like her to get and get educated. If you're going to say something and you're a politician, or I don't know what your position is, you really need to know what you're talking about. This book is called Liberal Fascism, The Secret History of the American Left from Mussolini to the Politics of Change.
It's a great book, caller. Way to go.
And they have that on Amazon.
Published by
okay,
Regnery?
just
It's
Stand by. Third point.
Third point.
This is all to Coco
Third point
Sudek.
is my city is primarily Hispanic, and I've had 2 Hispanic attendants, and they both are Republican. In fact, one of them is so excited about being Republican, she came with me to the Republican GOP meeting.
there you go.
Coco.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Stay on the line. We're going to let Coco respond to you, Jane.
So first of all, Democrats are not in favor of open borders. We never have been, and the borders before weren't open. As a matter of fact, Obama angered a lot of us on the left because he did more deporting than any president before him. But that said, Donald Trump doesn't care about sex traffickers. He doesn't care about you. He wouldn't protect you, and he wouldn't cross the street for you. And if you want to worry about sex traffickers, the number one sex trafficking moment in American life is always this weekend over the Super Bowl. But the fact that you're freaked out about people coming over from other countries and
What do you mean?
raping
What do
women.
you mean? What do you mean by the Super Bowl?
The Super Bowl is a huge
It's a
problem
big,
with essentially
prostitution down in the city where it takes place.
yeah, it's horrible.
Well, I'm more interested. You were just
Wait,
saying
hang
the
on.
fact that she's upset about people coming over means you were making a point.
I
I'm
don't.
interested.
No Democrat wants open borders. We want We want smart security. We need our borders protected. But that doesn't mean that I want to throw out every migrant. I think there's room for asylum, and I think our country is stronger with more immigrants. And I think if we don't continue to take more immigrants, we'll weaken on the vine. We need that new dynamism, that new energy.
Jennifer, your response to that.
Every time that Trump suggests that we need to tighten the border, anything he mentions, from a wall to any kind of enforcement, the border control, remember, it's the Democrats. Many of them want to get rid of ICE. Okay?
Right.
So the idea that they don't want the borders to be secure is complete nonsense.
That's not
Because
true. That's not true.
Hold on a second, Coco.
Let her
What
finish.
political party, which one, the Republicans or the Democrats, have a movement with AOC and a whole host of other people in the House, including Kristen Gillibrand, who never used to be considered a progressive, but now I guess she is, actually calling for the abolishment of ICE? I'm sorry,
But
that's not...
But that's a
Coco,
giant leap
it's-
between.
how-
Because ICE is not immigration. ICE is a police force
Immigra-
that has been weaponized
Okay.
and empowered
and
to be
demonized
abusive.
and
Yes.
demonized.
Yes.
These good people
Yes.
who are trying to do
Of
their
course there are good
jobs
people.
are demonized as a whole, as a unit.
But
Okay,
just-
this is the problem. And it's really difficult for people like this caller and a whole host of other people to hear their concerns, legitimate concerns about the border and security, as we've had many, many crimes committed by illegal immigrants, not legal immigrants or Mexicans. Trump never threw that whole group of people under the bus as a whole. He was specifically talking about people who were committing crimes
Would you
who would
ag-
have no business being in this country. It's
Would
a
you ag-
legitimate concern.
Would you acknowledge that Kamala Harris, who was the first person to say, let's abolish ICE, and
Yes.
Julian Castro, who also I think was very close second to that,
Mm-hmm.
they're gone. They did not make it through the process, and I don't believe.
But the Democrats-
Just
the
a minute.
Democrats
No,
never kicked them
I'm
out.
talking. I'm talking about presidential candidates.
Yeah, AOC is a designated substitute
Dave,
for.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Bernie
she is,
Sanders.
She is not. She is not a presidential candidate.
No, she's
she
not.
She believes that. I believe that.
Well, he's
But what
talked about
I'm
putting. She's talked about making her vice president, and
talking about Buttigieg. By the way, I'm talking about Buttigieg and I'm talking about Biden. Neither of them
Right.
have suggested they abolish ICE. Now, maybe they will when they get to a
but
campaign.
Sanders
We gotta-
and
Sanders,
Warren,
yes.
both of them are open. They say they won't commit to it, but they are open to abolishing ICE. So I don't think it's
But
you know.
but look, but we're not talking about opening up all the borders and letting anybody come in.
So you
who
say
wants to
now.
come in. No,
So
no.
you say
no,
now.
no. This is what.
No, I think that's
no,
standard
This is what
Democratic,
Democrats
thinking.
believe.
Yeah.
We just believe that this organization, ICE, that was established under the Patriot Act after 9/11, has been empowered too far, and it encroaches on human rights, and it is not a great representative or steward of our immigration system.
But the Democratic
they're not the same thing.
Coco, but the Democratic Party, whether we're talking about at a municipal level, a state level, or the federal level, the Democratic Party is not going to aggressively search for people who are in this country illegally.
Fortunately, that is
because
what Obama did. Obama did
because-
more deportations than any president
We're not
before.
talking about Obama.
But Obama,
okay?
but wait, but if you're going to tell me what a Democrat would do, then we have to look at the last Democrat who ran the federal government. And Obama
no,
deported
hold on,
people
hold on,
and
hold on,
had a
hold on, hold on.
policy
There-
about
may I please?
ramping
May I?
up deportations of illegal immigrants and legal immigrants. who
Why were
committed
there not
crimes.
more people marching in the streets to challenge him on that?
Well, why?
And
why
by the
don't
way,
Democrats march in the streets?
well,
That's
well, let
another
me ask
question.
this- well,
That's a
but-
different question. I'm
So
telling
does
you, I don't
so
agree
as
with
a
that.
member of that Obama administration that was cracking down on illegal immigration,
Mm-hmm.
did that tarnish? Does that tarnish Joe Biden? He was part of that administration.
I do
He
think it
didn't
tarnishes
disagree
Joe
with
Biden.
it.
Of
Okay.
course I do.
You think it?
But let me say,
does it
but-
dismiss him as a
may I-
candidate in your view?
Can I
Wait,
get
Is that
in
one of the
this?
reasons? I know you're not for Biden.
I'm not for Biden. There are a lot of things I think.
I'm not for Biden either.
There are a lot of things that I think are dismaying about Joe Biden, but I want to make something very clear.
become
But I
the
want to make
Cocoa
something.
Hour.
That's okay. I just want to make one. I want to make something. I want to make something very clear. Just because I'm not diminishing people's fears, but I think the Republicans harp and ratchet up people's fears for their own benefit. And I honestly don't live in the kind of fear that makes me afraid of everybody who wants to come into this country.
Coco,
No, you're just
Coco,
scared to death about Donald Trump, and you act like the whole world is going to fall apart if he's reelected. Don't
Chris
tell me you
Roebling.
don't live in fear, Coco.
Chris
You do.
Roebling.
Well, I don't live in fear. I live in fear of Donald Trump's
That's
government.
very
Chris
sick.
That's
Roebling.
not the same thing. And I'm not afraid of people based on their race. I'm afraid of him based on the things he says and does. That's a very big distinction.
Chris Roebling,
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
jump in there.
Thank you.
Don't be so shy.
That's great. All right. So, Coco, you're mentioning that Democrats aren't, that Republicans are exploiting fears. A year ago, I mentioned this in my about Nancy Pelosi a year ago saying we're not going to have a one-party impeachment, and then we did. But a year ago, the Democrats, from about the 1st of December 2018 until about, about Valentine's Day 2019, the Democrats engaged in a nonstop fear campaign about what Trump was doing with kids on the border.
As they should have. They
Well,
were
now
right.
hold
they
on,
were
hold-
absolutely correct.
One second.
All right.
I'm going now. If facts may intrude on the conversation momentarily, I just want to point out that number one, Trump was doing exactly what Obama had done.
That's not
Number
true.
two, the physical appurtenances that were available to Trump at the time were exactly those which had been left by Obama. Number three, and I hear you saying we are not the open borders party, although I would say whenever given an opportunity to show that you're not the open borders party, you always take you being Democrats, not you, Coco, but Democrats always are taking the open border answer. Okay, for instance, here in Chicago, our new mayor has declared this to be a sanctuary city today, tomorrow, and forever. And that is not only a federalism violation, but it is a public safety violation. And I believe that the public, regardless of, you and I are going to differ on the facts, I think the public understands, people who care about jobs for regular Americans, people who care about economic security, income growth, which we've seen for the first time in 25 years under Trump, are people who are going to say the Trump side of this conversation is more concerned about controlling immigration into the country than the Bernie Sanders or the Klobuchar or the Warren or the Buttigieg side of the conversation, in my humble opinion.
I think this whole notion of abolishing ICE is a little bit of a red herring, because if you did abolish ICE, something else would replace ICE under a different name. What you really want to do, what you really want to
It's an
do
applause
is take
line.
ICE and put it under new management.
But that okay, but you would acknowledge just on the text alone, it has been an applause line. It is something many have intoned. AOC has not been rebuked by Bernie Sanders on this.
I didn't
she
say
has
she
been
was.
exalted by Bernie Sanders and given far more prominence in the Democratic realm than I think most of us are comfortable with. Right?
She's a supreme talent. Can I respond to his
Go
point?
ahead.
So first of all, every time we have an immigration question, Democrats don't take the open borders position. The Democratic-led Senate passed immigration reform, much-needed immigration reform, which wasn't taken on a bipartisan basis, and that bill was not taken up by the Republican-led House. And that immigration reform had increased controls. Second, sanctuary city has nothing to do with open borders. It's about the local cops saying we can't help ICE because we need people to be able to come to us as police, and if they don't, then we'll have increased crime.
We've got to pause. We've got to break. 1-800-723-8289. One more segment. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Just a programming note, 2 weeks from tonight on our program on the 16th of February, we're going to do a significant dive into the issue of attempts to delegitimize the election and to screw it up, whether it's the Russians, whoever it is. We're going to really look into voter security and election security for this year. We've got some experts coming on who will delve into that subject. So again, I know it's near and dear to everyone's heart. It should be, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. We want fair elections, and we'll be talking about that 2 weeks from tonight.
You can talk about this question of why Trump is supporting Sanders on that program.
We definitely could. Yeah. Let's go to Eric, listening to us in Rio Linda, California, on KTKZ. Go ahead.
Did I hear someone laugh about Rio Linda? Well,
No. I was laughing
that's
about
fine.
John
No, I don't
sneaking in a
care.
snarky comment.
No, we weren't.
I know it's a joke.
We
from
love
Rush.
Rio
He
Linda.
always-
Tell us,
he
where
always
is
talks
Rio
about it.
Linda?
What
Where
county
is
are
it?
you in?
Where is it?
It's north of Sacramento, just
Okay.
a little north of Sacramento. Very small, old-fashioned.
I love
But at
it.
any rate,
Good.
I'm
Halfway to
tired.
Mount Shasta.
Everything's
Pardon?
north of Sacramento.
Halfway to Mount Shasta.
15 minutes.
More than
10,
halfway to
10
Mount
12
Shasta.
miles north of Sacramento.
Wow.
Great. How can we help you tonight, Eric?
Okay, I just wanted to agree with that dear woman that called in to support Trump, and he's not a racist. He's not a fascist. And what she said, Dinesh D'Souza did a great movie on fascism that showed Trump, and then it also showed Marxist, whoever that was.
Dinesh
But
D'Souza,
at any
the guy
rate,
convicted for a campaign finance felony.
The same one.
Fantastic
Yeah,
guy.
has
Same
nothing-
one.
has nothing
Guy.
to do with the
Wrote
movie.
several different checks to his friend under different names. And
Has
accounts.
nothing to do with the point,
Fantastic
Coco.
guy.
And when you look
Nothing
at
to do with
He
the
is a
point.
great guy.
Incredible source.
This,
Okay,
all
wait a
the
minute.
lies,
Go ahead.
all the lies that Democrats continually
happened to be
say
accurate,
about
what she said.
Trump, and how he
Coco
lies all
stumbled
the
into a
time.
truth
And
there.
I would like to hear some more lies of his. I don't hear them. He exaggerates, sure, but the main thing is I enforced laws for 28 years, and what Schiff did. And I took classes from some of the biggest experts because we had to testify in court. We handled evidence and all the rest in prosecuting violators. Okay, so what Schiff did, and to say that that was what the founding fathers wanted, that is an absolute lie and a disaster, and it makes me sick to hear someone say that about
Was it
our
a lie
founders.
that
guy's
Trump thought Obama was a Muslim?
Oh, who
What
knows?
does that have to do with the
Well,
price of
he
tea?
was
mean, that's
raised
that is a pretty
Muslim. He was
basically
raised Muslim.
racist
He was
trope,
It's
I
not a
think.
racist statement. I mean,
sure.
Time,
It's
one,
ridiculous.
Eric,
He's
one
a
at a time.
communist.
In
One at a
Indonesia,
time.
it's a fair question.
Oh, my.
Are you telling me that
Wait,
you
one-
have
one
some
second, one second.
entertain some ideas that
does
Obama
that
might
have to
be
do with the
Muslim or might
caller?
be
He
Arab?
even slipped up one time and talked about his Muslim faith.
He didn't slip
Wait
up.
a minute.
He
We're
did, I
getting.
heard it.
We're
Wait, let's
getting.
let's not go back
Eric,
into. I don't know.
don't
You
deny
know,
that.
We're getting. Hold it.
I want to say,
Chris, wait a
Eric-
sec. Chris, wait until you're called on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your call.
Yeah, I like it.
Keep listening.
Have a good day.
We're now going to talk, but thank you for joining us. Now, Chris Roebling, say what you're going to say.
Yeah,
Guys
I
fighting
think
with each other here.
I hope Coco agrees with me on this, but I have a sneaking
not.
suspicion she won't. I had the privilege of going to Northwestern Law School. I'm not an attorney, but I did go, and I showed up, and I can tell you, if I happened to do well in trial practice, if anybody in that class had done what Schiff did and what the president's attorneys showed on the record, what Schiff did,
Specifically, what do you mean?
in not presenting the elements in the record that were contrary to those that they did present, and then differentiating those out so that the court, in this case the jury of the senators, would understand, yes, he made some statements about other issues that went the other way, but I think that the case that we saw was abominable.
I totally disagree. I don't know what you're talking about what he did.
Well, there's a.
He
there-
was
well,
a-
I'll-
he did
I
a
will
tr-
send you a link to
he did a
the
tremendous job
line
as a-
by line
he did a tremendous
destruction.
All right,
job.
let's go, Coco.
He did a tremendous job as a prosecutor. It isn't his job to present the alternative arguments, although he did. He did an hour.
That's exactly
on-
wrong.
on
The prosecutor.
counter-arguments.
This is exactly the attitude that
No,
led
no,
to
no,
the FBI not disclosing the information that was exculpatory.
No.
You cannot. This
I
is
don't know what-
exactly.
I don't know what
Coco,
information
this
was
is
ex-
exactly the
I don't
problem.
know what information
No,
was
no, no,
exculpatory.
wait a minute. Hold on.
Adam Schiff
It was
presented the
detailed.
information.
Now wait a minute. Exculpatory information
What?
is a responsibility
Which one?
of the prosecutor.
Which one?
Hold on. Is that true or not?
Which
Prosecutors
information?
are mandated by the court to turn over exculpatory
He
information.
didn't hide
to-
evidence. He did not hide evidence. He
I'm
did not
saying-
conceal
hold on.
evidence.
Would you agree
He
that
did not.
prosecutors
I'm
are
not going to agree
bound-
with anything you say right
You
now
see, that's
because
exactly right.
you're trying to set me
See,
up in
this
some
is-
kind of
I-
fake Socratic
no,
argument.
No.
But
I'm
I don't know what you're
saying
talking
is,
about.
One at
What
a time. One at a
exculpatory-
time.
You didn't watch
Coco.
the- you didn't watch
Coco.
the argument.
Coco.
I did.
Coco.
I did not watch the entire thing because I work.
Okay.
But I don't. But I don't know what
The
exculpatory
FBI
evidence you're
hold
talking
on,
about.
The FBI withheld exculpatory information to the extent that the FISA court has now issued
Right.
extremely rare orders about the FBI and the United States Department of Justice.
Right, a
Okay,
reprimand.
that happened in the case of Carter Page, an individual, a United States proper person.
Right.
Whose rights were denied by
Except
the
that
United
was not
States.
the entire case. That was only a portion
Sorry.
of the Carter
doesn't
Page.
matter. It was
Yes,
wrong.
it was.
It was
That was
wrong.
a small portion of it. And by the way, the investigation started off because Carter Page shot his mouth off in Europe about all of the campaign shenanigans that was going on. There were assumptions that were made by the FBI that were not appropriate to be made, and it is appropriate for the FISA court to call them out on it. But that's not the same thing as saying that all of the evidence that they
Adam Schiff
about
lied.
no, he did
Adam
not lie.
Schiff lied on the floor of the United States
He
Senate.
read a
Oh,
fake
really?
Adam Schiff lied
Trump's
continuously on the
lawyer
floor of the
didn't
United
disclose
States
the
Senate.
fact that he was in the room when Trump told Bolton to call Zelensky in July. That's a lie. There were all kinds of lies by the Trump lawyers.
About what happened in front of the United States Senate that will
We'll see you next
none of
week.
put this
That's accurate.
impeachment
We,
trial-
it's of America.
No, it's the entire